How's it going? My name is Brent from Encore PPF and Tint, and today we are Tint. So we're going to go over how to heat shrink a rear window today. All we're going to be doing is heat shrinking. We're not going to do any installation or anything like that. This is just how I train people to heat shrink rear windows. So this is gonna be super basics. We're gonna just get right down to the fundamentals of heat shrinking window film to a rear window, and just show you guys exactly how I teach people how to tint a rear window as far as the heat shrinking process. So let's go ahead and get started on this. At least go over some of the things. So things you're gonna need for what we're gonna be doing today would be a heat gun. We're gonna go ahead and use a rubbing alcohol / water mix to put the bounce pad on the rear window today, because it is raining today, so it's chilly outside and it's gonna take forever for regular soapy water to dry up. So we've got the bounce pad, and that's because we're gonna be doing dry shrinking today. So I'll show you that whole technique. We've got a couple pieces of plastic here that we will use when we're trimming the material as far as the window tint on the window, so that we're not touching the blade on the glass. We've got a blade for trimming. We've got a Bondo card for laying down our H pattern. We've got a wax pencil here in white. And then we've also got a sponge and a light. So the light is going to be needed to put on the inside so that when we're trimming, we can see what we're cutting. Let's go ahead and go over that. First, I'm going to get rid of this phone because it's apparently going to sit here and make noise. And then I don't know if I said it already, but we've got a roll of window tint. Definitely going to need that. And this is I believe it's a 40-inch roll. All right, so let's get started with this process. You know what? You're also gonna need a glove. I didn't have that up there. Let's get that up there. I don't want you guys to forget that. That's super important. And that we're gonna use for pushing out all the fingers and all the areas that we shrunk while we're doing this heat shrinking process. Let's get on cleaning this window. So how I would go about this would be to wet the window down, and then let's go ahead and wipe this down as if the window is quite dirty. Okay. And then we'll wipe down the other side here. And now you can see that the window's still quite wet. So I can just go ahead, I'm gonna take this bounce pad right now and go right over this. Now, if it was warm outside and the window was drying, then what I'd be doing right now is adding more water to the window, because you really need to get some moisture on this bounce pad in order to get it to transfer some of the whatever's in it to the glass. And what this bounce pad is going to do is it's going to create a barrier basically between the window film and the glass, so that the window film will float on the surface and not tack. And that's important for the heat shrinking when it comes to dry shrinking a window. Okay, so we're done with this. Go ahead and get rid of that. We're gonna need to wait for this to dry now. And then we will get to laying the film on here. Now do remember, when you're tinting windows, when you're heat shrinking, you want the window film to be just like it's going to be once it goes inside. So we're gonna put the window film side on the glass, liner side out. That does two things. One, that heat shrinks it just like we're going to apply it, as well as that is a sacrificial layer, that release liner. So you can scratch it, mess it all up, and you're fine. If you flip it over and heat shrink it that way, it'll probably still work, but you do run the risk of scratching the film or damaging the actual film, because that is the side that's going to be exposed on the inside of the car once it's installed. Also, let me grab this roll. This is incredibly important, and it's something that a lot of people don't realize. This is a roll from manufacturer. These two ends here are the only ends where film can shrink. This edge here in the middle, or down this whole side, is not shrinkable. So you can only, you can only heat shrink the factory edges. So any edges that you cut as far as on the sides, not shrinkable. It'll be a disaster. So if you put the film on there incorrectly, because like let's say it's a smaller window and you're like, oh, I could fit this on if I turn it sideways, well then you have to shrink the sides. So just know that top and bottom factory edges of the roll are the only part that will shrink. The other side is a mess, and maybe I'll even show you what that looks like when you put some heat on that. It just turns the film into garbage. All right, and then if there's questions that you guys have during this install process, put them in the comments and I'll reply to you guys. So if there's something maybe that I missed or something you'd like to see some more coverage on, definitely let me know and I'll get you guys some more information about certain processes or, you know, techniques and things like that. I think we're also going to be doing, coming up pretty soon here, I'm going to have my wife, or I'm going to get somebody else that doesn't mind really being on camera, and we're going to teach somebody how to heat shrink windows. So look for that to be coming up. That should be pretty interesting because you're actually going to get to watch, you know, somebody who's very new at heat shrinking learn that process while I constantly go, oh no, you can't do that. And then we'll, you know, correct the technique until it gets closer to what it needs to be in order for them to be, you know, an installer. All right, so this is dry now, and that's important. We are doing a dry shrink, so it's important that this window is fully dry before you put film on it, because the whole point of the bounce pad is for the film to float on the glass, and if it's wet at all, that spot's gonna stick. Okay, so the way that I do this when it's on a roll is, first of all, you need to make sure which side is the liner side and which side is the film side. Normally I just stick it in my mouth, wiggle my teeth back and forth on it till I crinkle up that edge, and then the side that looks silver is the side that is going to be up, which is liner side. Let me get this blade. Normally I'd be wearing a pouch, but I'm not doing that today just for the video's sake. Okay, so let's get this laid into place. Okay, I'll flip that over here in a moment. Make sure we've got plenty big enough piece of film. And we'll go ahead and cut through this. Okay. So I'm installing a really light, or, you know, we're gonna be heat shrinking. This is a 50%, so it's a very light film. And I did that just in case we do some cutting. Normally this wouldn't flip over like this. All right, there we go. So just in case we do some cutting, oh man, the roof was wet. That stinks. All right, let's go ahead and take our towel. So if you do happen to get a part wet, let's go ahead and dry that. So I'm gonna just do that, and then I'm gonna dry this film off. We really don't want this to be wet. Okay, there we go. Back on track. Okay, let's go ahead and trim this. Now, when we're trimming this, this first cut is going to be a real rough cut. So we definitely want this to be cut a little bit too big, and then we'll go around for our final cut after the heat shrinking process. So what I've got here is just a little piece of plastic, very thin piece of plastic. It's from a chiseler, little chiseler. I just cut little pieces off, and then that gives me something that I can sink my blade into and then run around the window. Okay. And this one you want to make sure and leave it like an inch or so. On the bottom you can't quite get that big, but you can leave it about a ½ inch to an inch wider into the blackout. And now if you're working on a really hard window, as far as heat shrinking goes, which this is not, then you'll want to get these sides even closer and keep them real close, because it's just more film that you're having to heat shrink on the contour. So the less of the contour that you're shrinking, the better. So you keep that film a little bit tighter, and that'll be helpful. Okay, let's get rid of this now. Perfect. All right, so now let's go ahead and do our H pattern. So what I've got here is a sponge, and I'm gonna put a little bit of water on it so that we can do our H pattern now. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this out towards the center, and then I'm gonna go right up the edges here, about an inch into the window, like that. Let's do the same thing on the other side. So we'll lift this up, we'll run out the center, and by center, I just mean from top to bottom. We wanna be right in the middle. Now let's go ahead and tack down this H pattern. So we'll start out in the middle, lift the film up, bring it towards us here, and then to get this side to lay flat, we wanna go ahead and push the fingers up and push the fingers down, and then we come back with the card and mount that down. It's important that you do that with your fingers, because it's very easy to swipe over this, and if you don't do this, what's gonna happen is that film is gonna catch a wet spot, and then if there's a finger here, you're gonna go right over the finger and crease that material. So it's very important that you push that out with your hands first and then mount it with the Bondo card. Okay, let's do the same thing here. Lift the film up, bring this over. And it looks like we're getting a lot more fingers on the top than we are getting on the bottom. And so what you can do to correct that is to redo your line a little bit higher. So come up a couple inches, and that'll put more of the fingers then on the bottom, so that you've got them split up about 50-50 is how you really want them to be. That way you're shrinking just as much on the bottom as you are on the top, and you don't make one side like really difficult and then the other side real easy. All right, so now we did our pattern, or mounted the center. I'm gonna push this down with my hands, move any fingers that could be over here on the side down to the bottom. And then we'll go ahead and mount that with our Bondo card. Okay, now what I want you to do is take this wax pencil, let's go right up the middle. We're gonna split this window into 4 sections. And then in those sections, we're gonna put some lines about every inch or 2. Like this. Just careful not to crease the film as you're going over these fingers. And I'll do the same thing up here. So I'm just dragging it really lightly across there. Okay, great. Let's get our glove on and get our heat gun. All right, so get your heat gun, and I like turn it all the way up. Might not be best for you to turn it all the way up. You may want to start with a little bit of a cooler temperature to begin with. All right, so we've got all the fingers on the top and bottom of the roll. Nothing on the side, so they're just on the factory edges, and that's where window film heat shrinks. We've also got it liner side out, and we're gonna go ahead and start heat shrinking this now. Basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this in fourths. So we're gonna do this whole section, and then we'll go to the other side and do the same thing where we break it up in between the 2 sections. Now you can see that this first section, there's really not much to heat shrink, so we'll go ahead and push that down, and then we'll start working with these fingers here. And what I'm gonna do is just put some heat on this until you start to see the film get real tight like this, or the fingers start to go this way, and then we're gonna push that out. Now it's important that you do not continue to push down the rest of this material before it's been heat shrunk. a couple things can happen. One is you can kind of crease the film, and if you're a little bit sticky, when you wipe this down like this, you see how I just got rid of that finger right there? It just moved it from side to side, and we don't want that. We want all the fingers to be out here loosely floating so that we can heat shrink them. So we only want to push out the part that we've shrunk, and we're just basically going to go section here by section, and we're going to go from here and work our way towards the center and just take it in little bite-sized chunks. So I'm working at the top of the finger, and then I'm going down with it. Now you see how all the fingers are basically this way and not this way anymore? And that tells us that that's good and shrunk, and we can push that down. So we start at the top of the finger, and then we work our way down it like that. Now this thing did a little something weird here, and so I got the heat away from it, and now let's push that down. I don't know if that's gonna show up in the cameras, but basically that was from some finger over there. When I shrunk it, it came this direction. And we don't wanna keep putting heat on that. And hopefully I'll be able to explain this at some point. I think that's gonna be more of something I'm able to explain as we have somebody in here that doesn't know what they're doing. Because if you keep putting heat on that, it's gonna cause an issue with the heat shrinking process. So let's go ahead and continue to heat this. And you don't necessarily have to heat this whole area. Maybe you just go down an inch or so. But this just kind of cuts it up into sections and will help you just work with manageable pieces of the film while you're heat shrinking. Okay, we'll keep working our way down. See how everything's gone this way? And go ahead and push that out. Work our way all the way down to the bottom there. So you want to keep the heat gun moving as well. If you hold it in place for too long and you're not keeping that heat gun moving, when you're brand new at tinting windows, you're going to overheat and burn the film, and then that piece of film is garbage. I would finish heat shrinking it just for the practice, but as far as an install, that film's unusable. All right, let's go ahead and work our way up here. Now, if you'll remember, when I was laying this out, I did not bring this side up higher with my H pattern, so we have a lot more fingers on the top than we did right there on the bottom. So this top should be a little bit more difficult. I know I make this look so easy, don't I? I just can't not do this. I don't know how to not heat shrink film correctly anymore. It's difficult because it's hard to show you everything. That's why I need to show somebody in a video that's brand new heat shrinking a window and correct them as they're making mistakes, because I don't make those mistakes anymore naturally. Like, I don't even think about this. I'm just watching the film. I know exactly what it's doing, and it's doing exactly what I would anticipate it should be doing. But obviously when you're new, you don't have that. Also make sure that when you're heat shrinking these fingers that you're at the bottom of them and then working your way up. And then the way that you push this out is a lot of pressure. I'm putting a lot of pressure on the glass and pushing these fingers out, because you can crease these you can push them over onto themselves if you don't put enough pressure while you're pushing them out. It takes a while to get used to how to do that. And you can really, you can damage the film and crease it basically if you're not pushing hard enough on the glass when you're pushing those out. Okay. So I'm just at the bottom of those, and then as I see the film start to turn this way, I move on and continue to move up. And it's looking nice and tight there. If you can see that, there's like no finger there, right? And it's basically laid itself completely flat, and that means that we know that we've got a good shrink there. Okay, we'll continue working our way up inch by inch here. Okay. Now this part here is just because that finger is starting to come this way a little bit. And we'll see if that'll stay down now or if it's going to continue to come over. I would just, if it starts to continue to do this, I would just leave that alone and we'll deal with that once we get to the other side. All right, we're shrinking all the way up to the top. And you want to be also very careful when you're heat shrinking this at this edge, because if this film does this, get that heat gun away from that window, because you're going to singe this edge like that, and then it's never going to want to stay stuck down, and we just burn that edge. Because when the film is sitting like this on the glass, it has the option or the possibility of transferring the heat from the film to the glass, and when it pops up like that, you're putting all the heat right on that edge, and that is going to be a problem because you're going to overheat the film and burn it. Okay. The other thing that you should be doing when you're heat shrinking these windows is once you get down and you have that fully shrunk down, you want to come to the edge of the film and put some more heat on that. And you're looking for the film to move at all or some finger to pop up. There was a finger there. You're looking for a finger to pop up and for the film to do a little bit of extra shrinking. And what this process is called, I call this tightening up the edge. So now, okay, so like let's say you had this problem. What you need now is some more water up there, because we're done shrinking it, but we don't want it to continue to pop up, because eventually these two are going to come together and it's just going to start peeling this up. We want this to stay stuck down. Okay, terrific. All right, so here there's actually a little bit of water that got in there maybe when I was doing the H pattern. Whatever the case may be, you can see that this is all floating very freely, and then right here it is not. So as this, and then I just did that, I just moved this and this guy's starting to pop up. So let's bring this back over to us so it doesn't peel this whole bottom up. So what I'm gonna have to do with my heat shrinking here is I'm only gonna be able to shrink the area that's not sticking down to the glass. And that's one of the advantages and why you wanna make sure with a dry shrink process that this is all floating. Because now it's just that little V shape there that I get to heat shrink, and I don't get to shrink any of this finger in this area. And that just makes them more difficult, especially as you get down to here and they get bigger. Okay, let's go up this way. I'm just watching myself do this and I'm like, oh my gosh, this stuff is just laying down, and things are happening so quickly and I don't know exactly how to explain the problem. So this finger is going this way, right? And there's only so much that we're going to be able to do with that. I don't know if that makes sense. I need that finger to be up and down more than like this. So what I'm going to do is bring that over and push it up. Heat shrinking it like this is just going to make it tighter and tighter, and it's not the correct way to heat shrink that. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to explain that any better. All right, let's keep going. So we've got a little finger here. See how we're kind of getting that crescent moon shape there, like this? Let's put a little bit of heat on that finger. Now that finger you cannot put any more heat on. That needs to be pushed up like this. It's difficult when the film starts to do those crescent shapes to keep going. You need to heat shrink the lower part first and get that pushed up. If you keep heat shrinking that U shape like that, you're going to end up creasing the film and getting it really tight right there, and it's not going to be able to push out. Okay, we'll keep working our way up here. So this area is going to get tough. And I'll try to explain that as we go. But all the time, this is going to be your most difficult area on all the windows. Is going to be this corner here. Now you see how this has that arch to it? We don't like that. We want that arch to be more straight up and down, because as soon as it starts to do that arch, the heat when you go across it is going to heat it as if the finger is going this way, and that's damaging to the heat shrink process. I don't know how to explain that any better. So we'll just have to leave it there and see if that makes sense to you. Now see how we've got that thing again there? It's important that we don't just keep putting heat on that. That is shrunk enough because it's going this way now instead of this way, and we need to push that out and up to the part that isn't tacked down yet. So let's put a little bit more heat here, and you see how this finger is coming like this? That's not a good finger to heat shrink. We want that finger to be up and down. So let's bring that over to the edge there so that we get rid of that U shape on it. Let's heat shrink the bottom of this one. See, as soon as those turn into U shapes, I get the heat gun away and I push those out. Okay, and then let's take this all the way up to the top. You can go up more towards the top and just heat that until you see it all start to kind of level out, and then we can push that out. Now along this top, and when I'm doing this method that I call the tightening up the edge, what we're trying to do is the edge of the glass there. And we'll probably come back after trimming this and finalize this edge by tightening it up. Okay, so this part we're going to put some heat on there. And like I said, that this is stuck down and this is stuck down, so this is going to be a little bit more of a difficult area. And it's kind of difficult to explain, but that is shrunk enough. And we need to get rid of these lines here. How am I going to explain all this stuff? I hope this is good enough. It's really hard to explain why and what that's going to do to the film. It's just going to make it unmanageable. You're going to end up with these U shapes. They get really tiny and really thin, and then you're going to be trying to push them out and you're just creasing them over, and they're just going to look like this. You've got to get those pushed down so those fingers are going more up and down than keeping that U shape. Okay, let's make sure this is floating around here. Just staying on that very edge of the film, looking for everything to turn this way, and then we can push that part down. Same thing over here. Okay, push that out. So what I had there was this piece was starting to stick. Right here, you can see that that is stuck down, and we don't want the film to be stuck down below what we're shrinking. So let's pop that back up so that we've got a nice finger there to shrink. Okay. Everything is looking good here. Let's push that out. Okay, we'll keep going down here. Okay, and let's see. So when you do that, if you just keep pushing it all the way down, all you're doing is making some fingers like that there that aren't going to be able to be heat shrunk. When you put heat on that, you're going to create a tiny little line, and that's going to be an uneven heat shrunk area. And that can cause problems, especially on the defroster lines. Plus, when you cut this bottom edge after we've done the full heat shrink process, those type of things are going to pop up. These are the type of things that can really cause you to have some fingers on the inside coming up from the top and bottom, because that is not shrunk enough. So if you do happen to get this on here, you get a spot that is, you wipe over it and it's just really sticking and the film isn't floating like this, it would be best to lift this film up and dry everything back off, make sure the bounce pad is really good on there, and then continue back or go back to the heat shrinking process, because that's going to be really difficult to manage for somebody who's new at heat shrinking. Okay, so right here, I don't know if I can explain this really well, but I can see the way that I want to break this finger up a little bit. So I'm going to try pushing that down and take some of that finger that way, because we're getting this U shape here on the top and we don't want that. See, by just pushing that over, that shrunk really well and went down. Okay, we'll go down here. See now, yeah, I don't know if you were able to just watch it do that, but it just shrunk down and all laid flat. See if we can do that again. Okay, so we'll go ahead and put a little bit more heat on this, really tighten up that edge. You can see when I'm going across this edge that the film is moving a little bit and shrinking just a little bit more. And that's going to be really beneficial once this is on the inside. Okay, and don't set that anywhere near fabric, because really you're just going to burn things. All right, so at this point, you have another person jump in here with a light, or you just reach in and set it on the rear deck. Oh, I've got stuff in here. So it's nice to put this thing in a little bit of like a L shape, and that'll help it from just rolling around on the interior there. Okay. And now we can kind of see our bottom edge. It's gonna be really hard for me to see this edge because this does have a 5% film on the inside. So another thing I like to do is turn the lights off. And that allows us to see this edge really well, even though there is a 5% film on there. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn a light back on, because you're not really going to be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, so I would leave the light off while I was trimming this, but we don't really have that option because I want you to see what I'm doing. So we're taking this piece of plastic, we're putting our blade into it, and then we have to get it underneath the film. So we're going to lift this up just a little bit and get underneath there, and then we're going to follow right along the edge about 1/8 of an inch or so outside of the dot matrix, or at least into the blackout. This has a tiny little dot matrix goes around the edge of it. And we'll just do this all the way around, staying about 1/8 inch to 1/4 of an inch wider than the visible through on the glass. Now you will need to move that light around with you, except for I chose today to do a 50%. So I can actually see the dot matrix through it, which is great for this process anyway. Okay. Get the tip of that blade stuck back in there again, and then we'll pull this around. And I'm not doing a really good job here. You want to just make sure and cut a nice, make sure you're really paying attention. You cut a good edge around this. I can't really see some of this, so I'm just moving pretty quickly here so we can get over to the next portion of this install. Okay, so let's get rid of this excess here. Great. All right, so let's go ahead and run this heat gun along this edge. Now you see these little fingers that are popping up on this very edge. Little one there, and then one here. We want to tighten that up. So we want to put some heat on it and then get the heat away from there. Especially if the film starts to lift up at all off the glass, you want to get that heat away. That's important, otherwise you're going to burn that edge. And this is going to be the edge we're installing now. So you want to get right down to that edge. Look for the film to pop up a little bit, and then put a little bit more shrink on that, and then push it back down. And this is really going to tighten up that edge so we don't have fingers popping up. You see how that popped up right there? And then I still put a little heat on it, so I burnt this edge just a tiny bit. So it's probably best if you go more down like this on the film when you're tightening up this edge, because the underneath there is how I just burnt that. That isn't gonna be a problem, but as long as you get it down past the visible area into the blackout. If it was worse than that and it was causing the film to pop up, or you did that out further, then it'd definitely be an issue. All right, so let's finish tightening these up. Okay. All right, so at this point, I would go ahead and take this window and transfer it over here. So let's just do that. I'm just gonna transfer it over here just to show you what that looks like. Okay, so I'm gonna take my finger, push it into it like that with my fingernail till it lifts up, slide my finger underneath, and then we'll go ahead and lift this up. Okay, and hang this up. See how easy that went? Don't expect it to be that easy. You're gonna hear a lot of crinkling when you're doing it. And crinkling is bad, because that means you're putting little pinches in the film, and then those are gonna be little silver defects once you get it inside. We're gonna have to save that for another video though. Okay, so let's go ahead and go over a few things that you can run into as far as problems go during the heat shrinking process. Now, first thing we're gonna cover is cutting on the glass. I'm gonna hope that I can get a picture of this, but there's a bunch of lines going across the glass right here, and then you can see them turn and come up, and they're very light, and I'm hoping that we can get those. So they're very fine scratches, but that was from whoever tinted this window before I owned it. It was tinted more than once, because I can tell that this has been removed before, because they did damage the defroster lines. I can show you that as well. So if your defroster lines look like this, like real solid, and they get darker and then lighter and then darker and then lighter, those are ruined. Somebody's cut through those defroster lines are now missing. Okay, so let's see if you can see all those lines in here. And that's from somebody else cutting window tint on this piece of glass. Bunch of lines going up and down here. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's no fixing that. That's permanent damage. So do not put the blade onto the glass. Glass is so much softer now, it's very easy to scratch, even a real fine scratch. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and lay some film on here, and then we'll go over just a couple more things, and we'll call this good. So currently I have no bounce pad on the window, other than any like residual that was left over from the last heat shrink that we did, but I completely wiped the window off. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and just, very quickly here. You can already hear that. Hear that? That's the film sticking to the glass. If you hear that, you know you have not enough bounce pad on there. Okay. Let's just push this over. Bam, that's a crease. So what happens if you don't lift this up is that as you come across, the film is stuck here and stuck here. You push a finger into it and then you run it right over. That's the same thing that can happen here if you just try to take this up. Well, especially if you don't do it like I did. I really had a good angle on it, which will help, but you see how that just kinks up there and causes it to crease right there? Okay, so if you just take it and you go, whoop, that one went good, but you're playing, it's Russian roulette at that point, because eventually that's not gonna go good. All right, let's wipe this side down. You don't also always need to use the water in the center, but it is good practice. Okay, we'll get that down, and then let's see. Oh, that actually laid down okay, but don't do it that way. like I did that crease over here, these little ones, you're gonna run into this problem, but much bigger all the time. And then stuff like this. Once you crease a film like this, that's game over for that piece. You can put it on the inside and try and put some heat on it and push that down, but it's going to look like garbage. There's no coming back from that. And let's see if we can get rid of this. So this thing here, this U-shape, look at this big old U-shape. That's a disaster. So if you're putting heat on that and you're heating it up, it's like gonna get worse and worse. So don't do that. Because then when you go to push it out, those areas get really tight, and then you fold them over like this here, and it's like you're trying to push that stuff out and it just doesn't want to go, and then you put little creases in it, and then that's going to look terrible on the inside. Also, you know, if you guys are looking for some bulk rolls of material for practicing and things like that, reach out to us and we'll get you guys some pricing on stuff. We can get, you know, film that's very inexpensive up to the much higher qualities. Also, something I didn't mention in this video is take that cord there and put it over your shoulder. That will keep the cord from bumping against the side of the vehicle here. So none of this. We don't want to see that. So that's all creased, and let's see, that is burned, is what I call that. That's a burn, and there's no correcting that. So if you do something like that, just throw that piece away. I would recommend finishing the rest of the window for practice, and then, you know, that goes into the garbage. So this guy here, when you're pushing this stuff down and you leave something out there like this that's very small, very tight together, that is going to keep that memory and pop up off the defroster line. Those are the things that are really going to cause you a problem. So it's best to either bring some air into those. Let's see if we can get some air from up here. So I've got a nice air pocket here, and we're going to continue to bring that on down. I just missed it. Sometimes it's hard to get that air to go in there. And then we're going to put a little bit of heat on that so it forgets that. So basically when I put some heat on that, what I was looking for was it to, that line that was there that I could see in the film, I was looking for that to go away so that I couldn't see that line anymore, and then we can go ahead and push that out. Now because this is all stuck here, it doesn't want to just push out. But that's a way that you can help correct those and get the film to lose the memory of that little line. So that's the whole process with the lines and everything, so that you make sure and just stay into bite-sized manageable areas as you're learning. And then as you get down towards the bottom, it's going to get more difficult because those fingers are bigger. And as you get down towards these corners, it's going to get more difficult because that's just the way it pretty much always is with window film. Those bottom corners are going to be the most difficult parts. Terrific. Well, thank you guys for checking out this video. I really appreciate it, especially if you made it to this point. Thank you. If you did find something helpful, give a thumbs up and subscribe. We'll see you guys on the next one.